The notification that my sister had died arrived at 9:11 a.m., which was irritating for reasons that had nothing to do with grief. That was the precise minute our sterile fill line entered final verification, and interruptions during that phase created documentation nightmares that could echo for months. I remember the time because I was watching the pressure variance graph stabilize when my phone vibrated against the stainless steel bench, a quiet rebellion against protocol. The message came from a county liaison, not family. That detail mattered. Family wrote with emotion. Government wrote with efficiency. The text was brief and procedural. Sudden aneurysm. Apartment secured. Next of kin responsibilities required. No condolences. No wasted language. I did not cry. Crying introduced variables, and variables created errors. My sister would have appreciated that logic. She believed emotion was inefficient, and practiced emotional distance like a survival skill. We had not spoken in years, not because of anger, but because silence had become easier than repair. I finished my sign-off, sanitized my station, and removed my gloves with deliberate care. The line was clean, the data was stable, the product would not kill anyone today. That mattered more than my personal history. I was the director of compliance operations at Redcrest Biologics, a pharmaceutical manufacturer that worshipped speed and celebrated confidence even when it was unsupported by facts. I believed in statutes, documentation, and consequences. Redcrest tolerated me because regulators required my existence, not because executives valued my function. I took the elevator to the executive floor, where the air smelled like expensive coffee and optimism. The walls were glass, but nothing inside was transparent. Miles Rowan sat behind his desk, scrolling through performance dashboards like a man checking the weather before a picnic. He had been hired 6 weeks earlier as vice president of operational velocity, which meant he spoke fluently about acceleration and poorly about law. He was 33, well-dressed, and dangerously comfortable with risk that belonged to other people. "What is up, Lena?" he said, still staring at his screen. "My sister died this morning," I said. "I am invoking protected bereavement leave effective immediately." He looked up, blinked once, and rearranged his expression into something approximating concern. "That is rough timing," he said. "We are finalizing the Orion West distribution. The board is watching this one closely." "Federal leave law does not recognize timing," I replied. "It recognizes death." He leaned back in his chair. "Leadership requires commitment. Absence sends the wrong message, especially right now." "This is notice, not a request, Miles." He nodded slowly, like someone indulging a misunderstanding. "Just understand that fragility does not read well at this level." Something settled in my chest then, cold and exact. It was not grief. It was clarity. "So does non-compliance," I said. I left without waiting for a response. Inside the elevator, my hands shook, not from sadness, but from recognition. Redcrest believed I was procedural, replaceable, decorative compliance. That belief was about to become the most expensive assumption they had ever made. I returned to Redcrest Biologics 4 days later, dressed in black because it simplified decisions. Black required no interpretation. It announced seriousness without explanation. I arrived at 7:38 a.m., early enough to avoid traffic, but late enough to prove I was not sneaking. My access badge failed at the front gate. I tried again. Same result. The security guard on duty pretended to adjust his radio while avoiding my eyes. That behavior answered every question I had not yet asked. I walked around the building toward the loading dock. The sky was gray, the kind of color that suggested the weather was undecided about its own intentions. Trucks idled nearby, engines humming like they were impatient to escape accountability. That was where I saw it. A single cardboard box sat on a wooden pallet usually reserved for rejected raw materials. It was sealed with clear tape and labeled in black marker with my name. No title, no explanation, just Lena Hart. Miles stood beside it, holding a plastic bottle filled with something green and aggressively healthy. He looked energized, like a man who believed decisiveness was the same as intelligence. Standing a few feet behind him was a human resources associate named Brenda. She looked unwell, as if her conscience had arrived before her breakfast. "Lena," Miles said brightly. "Welcome back. Or farewell, depending on how you want to frame it." "You terminated me during protected leave," I said. My voice was level. Calm was always more unsettling than anger. "We adjusted around availability," he replied. "We needed agility. The operation cannot pause for personal disruptions. Who is now the registered compliance authority for this facility?" I asked. He laughed, a short, confident sound. "We automated approvals. Software does not take time off or attend funerals." That sentence was catastrophic. He did not know it yet, but he had just signed his own indictment in conversational form. I looked down at the box. Inside were my framed certification, a notebook filled with handwritten audit references, and a plant someone had gifted me years earlier. The plant was dying. It seemed appropriate. "You understand that this facility operates under a federal manufacturing license," I said. "Of course," Miles replied. "And it is still active. We checked." "Active only under continuous oversight of the named compliance authority," I said. "That authority was me." He waved a dismissive hand. "Paper language. Legacy thinking. We are moving forward." I picked up the box. It was lighter than I expected. Dignity does not weigh much when you carry it properly. I did not argue. Arguments alerted people. Silence allowed them to continue making mistakes. At home, I placed the box on my kitchen table and opened my personal archive. Every compliance officer keeps one. We do not trust companies to remember their obligations, because they rarely do. The federal manufacturing license was exactly where I expected it. My name was embedded in the authorization field, active only during employment and physical oversight. No successor listed. No delegation recorded. Redcrest Biologics was now operating illegally. I called a regulatory attorney named Jonah Pierce. "They are shipping on Friday," I told him. There was a pause on the line, then a quiet breath. "Then we wait," Jonah said. "Let them finish digging." I slept deeply that night. There is a particular peace that comes from knowing the law is on your side and impatience is working for the other party. By Wednesday morning, Redcrest Biologics was running faster than it ever had while I was employed, which was impressive in the same way a car accelerating toward a wall is impressive. Speed without restraint looks productive until physics intervenes. I did not need to be inside the building to know what was happening. The company had rhythms, and I had memorized them over years of audits, investigations, and corrective action reports written at 2 in the morning. The messages started arriving quietly, not through corporate channels, not through anything traceable. Personal numbers, disposable phones, people who understood that asking questions openly was suddenly considered disloyal. The first message came from a formulation technician named Owen, short and careful. They removed the secondary approval gate. "System says emergency override active." That should not have been possible. The software required biometric confirmation tied directly to the registered compliance authority. Tied to me. I did not reply immediately. I never replied immediately. Patience was a tool, not a delay. More messages followed. A quality analyst reported that audit logs were no longer time-locked. A packaging supervisor mentioned that batch reconciliation checks were being bypassed to maintain schedule alignment. Someone else said Miles had ordered the IT team to simplify the workflow and remove friction points. Friction points. That was what he called laws that existed to prevent people from dying. The shipment had a name: Orion Prime Release. Marketing always loved celestial language. It made products feel inevitable, as if gravity itself endorsed distribution. On Thursday afternoon, the system finally protested. An automated alert flagged a biometric failure on batch ORP441B. That meant someone without authorization had attempted to close a record requiring compliance certification. In a functional organization, that alert would have frozen everything. Production would stop. Leadership would call legal. Someone would admit error. Redcrest did none of those things. Instead, someone forced the approval using administrative credentials. They did not even bother to disguise it well. The override left a clean, unmistakable trail. Username, timestamp, access path. The kind of evidence prosecutors dream about. That was not an accident. That was intent. I documented everything. Screenshots, system logs, cross-referenced timestamps. I matched override times with internal calendar meetings that Owen had quietly forwarded to me. Velocity sync, executive acceleration review. Names like that always accompanied bad decisions. I forwarded the entire package to Jonah with a single sentence. Override executed. Evidence attached. His reply came minutes later. Do nothing. Let them ship. Waiting is difficult for people who mistake action for control. I had never made that mistake. Compliance work teaches patience the way gravity teaches falling. You do not rush inevitability. On Thursday night, I cooked dinner slowly. I cleaned my kitchen. I organized the box from the loading dock and set my framed certification back on the wall. Not as nostalgia, as reminder. Redcrest believed software could replace accountability. That belief required demonstration. At 11:47 p.m., my phone vibrated again. Another message from Owen. Trucks scheduled at dawn. Miles celebrating. Calling it execution excellence. I set my phone face down and turned off the light. Velocity without permission always ends the same way. Not with applause, with sirens. Friday morning arrived quietly, which should have warned them. Catastrophes rarely announce themselves with noise. They prefer routine. I woke at 5:30 a.m., made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table watching the sky shift from black to gray. Somewhere across town, Redcrest Biologics was preparing to celebrate itself. At 5:58 a.m., my phone buzzed. A single message from Owen. Trucks docking now. Miles brought champagne, real glasses. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was precise. People always celebrate too early when they confuse momentum with victory. At 6:12 a.m., I opened my laptop and connected to the federal oversight portal. My credentials were still valid. Regulatory access does not disappear just because a company decides you are inconvenient. I completed the form carefully. Facility name, license number, nature of violation, manufacturing and attempted interstate distribution of regulated pharmaceuticals without an active registered compliance authority. Deliberate falsification of batch records via administrative override. Imminent shipment already in progress. I attached the documentation. Termination notice, license record, system override logs. Time-stamped photographs Owen had sent of pallets being shrink-wrapped on the dock. The form did not allow emotion. It allowed facts. I appreciated that. At 6:19 a.m., I clicked submit. The confirmation banner appeared in soft green. Report received. Case number assigned. I closed the laptop and finished my coffee. By the time enforcement vehicles arrived, Redcrest was already congratulating itself. Miles was reportedly in the executive boardroom delivering a presentation titled Operational Triumph Through Agility. Slides full of arrows pointing upward, charts stripped of context, confidence thick enough to choke on. At 10:07 a.m., the front gate opened for 3 unmarked vehicles and 1 local police cruiser. They did not use sirens. They did not hurry. Authority does not rush. Inside the boardroom, Miles was mid-sentence, explaining how removing legacy friction had unlocked performance. That was when the door opened. The lead agent did not knock. He stepped inside, flanked by 2 others, badges visible, expressions neutral. The room went silent in a way that felt physical. This meeting is concluded, the agent said. Please remain seated. Miles laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. We are in the middle of a critical review. The agent placed a folder on the table. Federal Stop Production Order, effective immediately. Confusion followed. Questions, denials. The CEO demanded explanations. Miles attempted to speak, then stopped when the agent turned toward him. Did you authorize the administrative override on batch ORP 441B at 1614 yesterday? The agent asked. Miles hesitated. It was only to keep things moving. Without a registered compliance authority present, the agent continued. Miles looked around the room. She left. We had to ship. The agent nodded. That was sufficient. Handcuffs appeared. The room changed temperature. Outside, the trucks never left the lot. Every pallet was seized. Operations halted. Systems locked. Licenses suspended. I watched from a diner across the street, coffee cooling in my hands. Through the glass, I saw Miles escorted out, his confidence replaced by disbelief. He did not look at the sky. He did not look at the building. He looked at the ground. Authority never apologizes. It simply arrives and takes what negligence offers. Redcrest. Biologics did not collapse all at once. It unraveled, which was worse. Companies prefer dramatic endings because they can narrate them. Slow failure offers no such comfort. Over the following weeks, the plant sat silent, while auditors moved through it like archivists of arrogance. Machines were clean. Floors were polished. None of that mattered. Compliance is not about appearance. It is about traceability. The board released statements filled with regret and carefully distributed blame. Miles Rowan was described as an isolated decision-maker. A deviation. A misunderstanding of authority. The language was sterile and inaccurate. Systems do not fail because of one person. They fail because many people decide not to stop the person who refuses to listen. Miles was charged with multiple counts related to falsification of records and attempted interstate distribution of misbranded pharmaceuticals. His legal team tried to argue that no patients had been harmed. The prosecution replied that intent and documentation were sufficient. The trucks had been stopped, not because Redcrest corrected itself, but because oversight arrived in time. I testified twice. Once for regulators, once for civil proceedings. Each time, I answered questions slowly and precisely. Emotion was unnecessary. Facts held their own weight. Did you warn leadership? I was asked. Yes. Did you explain the legal requirement? Repeatedly. Did they proceed anyway? Yes. That was the entire case. Some former colleagues avoided me afterward. Others thanked me quietly. Accountability always feels personal to those who benefited from the absence of it. I accepted both reactions. Neither altered reality. Redcrest announced a full shutdown within 2 months. The brand disappeared. The signage came down. The parking lot cracked and weeds pushed through concrete. Nature does not respect ambition. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Northway Therapeutics. Their chief compliance officer asked if I would meet for lunch. She did not ask about Redcrest. She did not ask about Miles. She asked one question. Do you believe compliance slows innovation? No, I said. I believe it prevents funerals. They offered me the role with authority written into the contract. No ambiguity. No automation replacing accountability. A salary that acknowledged risk. I accepted. Sometimes, late in the evening, I think about my sister, about the silence we shared and the distance we allowed to calcify. She believed rules were flexible. I believed they were structural. We were both right in our own ways, but only one belief survives contact with enforcement. I still keep documentation. I still read statutes for pleasure. I still sign my name carefully. It carries weight, not because I demand it, but because the law recognizes it. When new executives ask why our systems require patience, I do not tell them this story as revenge. I tell it as instruction. Gravity does not negotiate. Neither does compliance. And if someone ever mistakes my silence for permission again, I will let them finish speaking. Then I will document everything.